Today's video, we're going to chat through the whole Magic the Gathering 30th anniversary debacle, whether or not Rudy from Alpha Investments is doing a pump and dump. But more importantly, we're going to talk through why the collectors in that Magic the Gathering space have done a really good thing that I think is really important for you to hear as a sports card collector, because there's some lessons that can be learned there that we can be doing better with regards to pushing back in a sports card community space. Now, if you're not sure who Alpha Investments is, essentially he is probably the biggest Magic the Gathering YouTuber. Obviously, there are others that have bigger followings than him, but Rudy is a really insightful guy, and he's someone that consistently gets pushed back on with regards to maybe being accused of doing pump and dumps. He's an incredibly wealthy individual, as I've said before on the channel when I have spoken about him. He comes from a financial services background like myself. He was an investment banker, so he's always looking at things from a unique perspective, and he's trying to educate and inform his viewers, similar to what I do with how you should be approaching collecting and how you should be making sure you don't get caught into any, pitfalls or anything like that. Now, before I jump into some accusations towards him regarding pump and dumps, I just want to highlight the whole Magic the Gathering 30th anniversary scenario. So for those of you that are sports card collectors, essentially what has occurred in the last few months is that Magic, well, I should say the last few months, the last couple of years, like any other manufacturer in this period, they've started to pump out a lot more product. And one thing that was always interesting about Magic the Gathering is that you had cards released, when the first sets were released in the early 90s, I think late 80s if I remember correctly, but definitely very early 90s. And some of these cards were obviously part of the original set, and the way they've maintained value and the way they've maintained collectability for those cards is they implemented something called the reserve list, which basically means cards that are on that list can never be reprinted. And what they've done when they have reprinted some of these cards, even though I just said they can't be reprinted, when they have reprinted them, they've typically been, non-playable cards, right? They're not part of the rule set, they're banned cards, right? They just reprint them for certain, anniversaries and things like that. Essentially what occurred for the 30th anniversary is they announced a 4-card pack, I think it was, and it was about $1,100, I want to say, okay? $1,100 USD plus tax. And that is a pretty crazy thing for Magic the Gathering, because these boxes of cards you could always buy typically, I think it's 36-pack booster boxes of the new sets that get released a couple of times a year for around, I think, $240 USD, around $300 USD. And it's almost always been the case. And because you've got that volume of packs, that's why the price is up there. But like I just said, essentially what they've done with this 30th anniversary situation is try to cash in on the hype that we've seen in other collectible markets, the things we've seen from a Pokemon perspective and the things we've seen more importantly from a sports card perspective. And what's been interesting to see is because the price point has been so utterly ridiculous, you've had a huge pushback from the collectible space within Magic the Gathering, pushing back on Hasbro, saying, you know what, guys, this is unacceptable. This goes against everything that you have done over the years. You've gone against your ethos. And like I touched on, at least I think I did a little bit earlier, Wizards of the Coast, who manufacture Magic the Gathering, who are owned by Hasbro, have been one of the few manufacturers that have always approached the printing from a sound and solid perspective, in the sense that they've always looked after their customers, right? They've always done the right things where they can by their customers. And that sort of sentiment has changed over the last few years, as it has for most other manufacturers, like I touched on a bit earlier. So essentially what they did when they announced this, 4-pack booster box that is $1,100, which is utterly ridiculous, is the community immediately pushed back and said, what the heck are you guys doing? Which is a complete counterpoint to what we've seen in the sports card space. When you look at sports cards, you've seen people be more than willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for boxes that historically only cost a couple of hundred. Yeah, we've always had things like Eminence, Flawless, Immaculate, that were always incredibly expensive boxes of cards. Okay, and that's always been somewhat, lapped up by these high net worth individuals that are within the hobby, right? Because they want to get those rare cards. That was a new thing for this kind of TCG space. So the fact that we saw this pushback on what should be a really affordable piece of product, because it's 30th anniversary, it's something that, they should have approached for every potential collector to get their hands on, and they haven't done that, and they've tried to charge an arm and a leg. It's been really good, in my opinion, to see the community push back on that, because it goes against their ethos. And it's completely unacceptable, and it's something we probably should have seen in the sports card space, and we've not seen enough of it, because what we've seen in the sports card space is people complain about it, but they still buy up the product and flip it because they want to try and maximize that money. What we've seen in the Magic space is so many people push back, and it looks like now the product has been released, Hasbro have had to, pretend that things have sold out to try and save face, because their stock price has come down significantly. Like, so significantly, it's constantly being talked about on relevant share trading shows in the US. It's being talked about, on shows based here in Australia as well. It's being talked about in the Wall Street Journal consistently, right? Because their share price has tanked. Their CEO, their board of directors are in literal panic mode because their share price has shit the bed basically, and it's primarily because of the reaction we've seen from collectors in the space. Now, the reason why I've talked about Rudy maybe potentially being a pump and dump is because it's something this guy's been accused of a lot in the past, and I've always found that incredibly laughable because he's one of those guys that he sort of tells you how it is. And I think if you haven't seen his content, even if you don't like Magic the Gathering, you'll find his channel is incredibly interesting and entertaining, and you'll learn a lot. Similar to Sports Card Radio, he's a bit of an old school guy. He calls things out a little bit more restrained than the Sports Card Radio guys. But the content he shares, in my opinion, is phenomenal, irrespective of whether you collect Magic the Gathering or not. I do not collect Magic the Gathering, but you can see I'm subscribed to him on both my, Dan the Cardman channel and my personal channel. I do watch a crap ton of videos, primarily do watch them from my personal channel. But you can sort of see here over the last couple of weeks, he's been saying to people, do not buy this product. If you buy this product, you are going to literally put an end to Magic the Gathering as we know it. As I touched on a little bit earlier, Magic the Gathering is a card game that has always maintained a certain ethos, right? It's always maintained a collector-first mindset for the most part. But now they've delved into this realm of charging you $1,100 for a box of cards. If all of a sudden people start buying that out of FOMO, what does that mean for the future of the game? It means we're going to see more of this kind of stuff being released. They're going to keep printing crap to death. The card's going to become less and less valuable, and they're just going to print the thing to death and become sort of an investment game, as we've seen in the sports card space. But the reason why I flagged Rudy from Alpha Investments is because, like I just said, he gets accused of doing pump and dumps all the time. So many people are seeing these videos, and there's probably like 20 here. I think he mentioned in the space of the last month, he had like 3 or 4 million views on videos, which is like blows out of the park anything he's done in the past. But from my perspective, I've always seen it similar to what I say about influencers in the sports card space, right? We've got people that think people are being negative because they can't see the forest for the trees. I think the same thing persists with regards to Rudy, where people see his opinion, they see how blunt he is, they see how, crude he can be, and they think he's saying things to you as a viewer because he wants to try and pump and dump. And in my opinion, it's very clearly not the case. Some people might disagree with that, but it's happened a lot in the past, actually. If you go back to watch his channel, you go check out Reddit, people have been saying things like that about this guy for, 2-3 years. And I've always found that, pretty laughable, right? Because the guy is an incredibly wealthy individual. He's not just a YouTuber. He's not just a retired investment banker, or I think he worked in wealth management, something along those lines. But he's also, a local card store, right? He buys a lot of this stuff directly and sells it to Patreon members and to, public members within the public as well through his eBay store. He's probably sitting on tens of millions of dollars worth of Magic the Gathering stock, including vintage boxes, right? So when people often hear him talk, they will always look at it through that lens and they think he's pumping and dumping. Sorry, I bumped the mic. I very clearly do not think he's pumping and dumping. I think he's trying to do, a good deed here for the hobby and flag to them, what, this stuff is unacceptable. You cannot buy this product because if you start buying it, more and more of this stuff is going to happen. And as I said a bit earlier, that is a very important lesson for us to learn within the sports card space because, so many people are so quick to rush out and buy this new product. When you see the shitty QC that we're seeing in Panini product right now, including Prism, which is like disastrous, right? And people are still running out to pay premium for that kind of crap. Like, come on, guys. And that's the message that, Rudy's trying to have from a Magic the Gathering space. And it's been really good to see, the whole community jump in and buy into that same viewpoint. We've seen, the tank in, the share price for Hasbro. We've seen the fact that these were listed and then they were pulled off Hasbro's website when they did get released because they're trying to save face, is what it appears to be. We're seeing a lot of negative content around, people pushing back on this, and they're speaking with their wallets, which is the most important thing you can do as a customer. That is how you get tangible change. If this kind of thing got snapped up, right, and I should also flag, some of you might say, well, how do we know it didn't sell out? Well, if you go check out eBay now, there's not a whole lot of this stuff being sold on the grey market, on the secondary market, which implies that not a whole lot of people have bought it, right? Because you'd imagine that flippers and scalpers would have bought them all and chucked them on eBay straight away, as they've done with every other Magic the Gathering and, sports card release. So the fact we've seen this pushback, the fact that we've seen, a community rise together and push back on this business for trying to, break down the ethos of what their business stands for is incredibly powerful, in my opinion. And I really wish we saw more of it in the sports card space because, Panini are getting away with murder right now, and it's completely unacceptable. They're charging top dollar, as I've always said, and they've kept their QC incredibly poor. They've not given two damns about us as customers. They consistently look to try and take advantage of us by continuing to, not even improve the QC, right? It's getting worse. It's getting worse and very, very fast. Yet, we've seen in the Magic space, people have said, you know what, let's stop this. Let's try and make a change, right? And when people accuse Rudy of pumping and dumping, I think that is completely inaccurate in my opinion. I think he's doing a really, really good thing for the hobby. And I'm sure if you guys check out his YouTube channel, if you haven't seen it already, you'll probably buy into the same viewpoint that I have. And again, even though you probably collect sports cards, if you're a fan of my channel, please watch his channel, right? Because it goes above and beyond the lessons he teaches you. He gives so many investment tips. He gives so many collecting tips. He gives you so many tips around how you should be, approaching the acquisition of product and the acquisition of cards if you want to look at it from an investment perspective. And he teaches you how to spot opportunities and things like that. His stuff is invaluable. So the fact that people, can't see the forest for the trees with him and think he's there trying to pump and dump, even if he is to some extent with some elements, right? In my opinion, he does a lot more good than harm, and his recent videos speak more than that, than anything I can say right now. So please check them out. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below if you do disagree with me, if you do think Rudy is pumping and dumping, because so many people are saying, well, he's just shitting on the 30th anniversary stuff so he can buy it all up himself. I very much disagree that is the case. The guy's a freaking multi-millionaire. I don't think he needs to do that. But, maybe he is. Who knows? You never know what the guy's thinking in his own mind. But again, the thumbnail was a bit clickbaity, but I want to try and get your attention for this sort of stuff because it's very important. If you do a bit of research, if you're in the sports card space, understand what these collectors have done in the Magic the Gathering space, in the Wizards of the Coast space, because it looks as though they're doing a really, really good step forward with regards to, putting their foot down and saying enough is enough as collectors. We need to ensure that this kind of bullshit does not enter into Magic the Gathering. Because if it does, it's going to be the end of it. And I really wish we saw that from a sports card perspective, because what we're seeing now is completely unacceptable. And in my opinion, it's just going to keep getting worse. I've said in the past, I think Fanatics could improve it. But as I've also said, the appetite is there for collectors in the sports card space to keep putting up with this bullshit because they don't truly care about the cards. They purely care about, predominantly, the most part, I'm not saying you as a collector, the viewer right now, but so many people within the hobby right now only care about that quick flip, right? They want that quick flip and they want to move on to the next card. And that thing is the thing that is spiraling. It's basically a big war machine that is funding the sports card industry as we know it. And that's not going to change, which means Panini are not going to change, which means when Fanatics comes in, they're not going to change. And I've just rambled on now for 12 minutes, but I hope it was coherent enough for you to understand the message of this video, right? The people that are telling you to be careful when it comes to stuff like this, that is not pumping and dumping, right? The fact that Rudy gets accused of this sort of stuff is not pumping and dumping. I find it utterly ridiculous, okay? He holds so much product, he sells so much product, I find that ridiculous. It's very different to when you've got people in the sports card space telling you to buy this card, Andrea Pirlo card, he's the best player of all time, buy this card, I collect his card, meanwhile on my eBay I'm selling hundreds of those cards, right? That is pumping and dumping. That is completely unacceptable. I don't think that's what's happening in this instance. Again, he's done a great job with the 30th anniversary stuff. I'm talking in circles now, but please leave me a like and a follow if you did enjoy the video. But more importantly, share your thoughts down in the comments below, because I think this is a really important topic that we need to bring to the attention of sports card collectors, because this shows that people power can make a positive change. And if they can do it in this space, we can do it now. So let's push for that, essentially is what I'm trying to say. I really appreciate your support. If you've watched the whole video, you're a true fan, and I really appreciate you. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.